All right, guys. So this is kind of what we were working on the day before, where we're converting like fractions and percents and decimals. So I showed you how basically, in order to get convert this over a fraction to a percent, we basically make the denominator 100. Okay, so because everything at a percent is always out of 100 when it comes to a whole. So basically, we just figured out, okay, 2 times 50 is 100. So then I multiply the three also times two, and that's 6. So that means it's 6%. And that's how much 3 out of 50 is. And then if I want to convert that to a decimal, I got to move the decimal 1, 2 places. And then again, if there's an open space, I'm going to put a 0. Same thing here. If it's 25, 25 times 4 is 100. And I also multiply the 3 times 4, and that's 12. So then 12 out of 100 is 12%. And then again, I move that decimal 1, 2 places, and so it's 0.12. All right. So I'm going to do that again with this one here. And I'm actually going to show you another way too. I think is going to be useful for you guys. So now times 5. Hey, sorry about that. I had to stop for the bell. All right. So in order to get 100, I do 20 times 5, and that's 100. So then I'm also going to multiply the 3 times 5. Okay. So 20 times 5 is 100. And then 3 times 5 is 15. So that makes it 15%. Okay. Because remember, the goal is that we're converting this fraction into a percent. And then I just move that decimal 1, 2 places to the left. So then the answer in a decimal form is 0.15. And then we put a 0 here just as a placeholder, just to kind of help emphasize where that decimal is at. Okay. Now, 10 times what number gives us 100? That would be 10. So 10 times 10. I also multiply the 3 times 10. That's going to be 30 over 100, which then is 30%. And then again, I just move that decimal 1, 2 places. So then it's 0.3, and then I put a 0 in front just to emphasize where that decimal's at. Okay. All right. So what I'm going to do is, like, that's one way to do it is, how much out of 100. I'm going to show you another way to do it. Okay. Where we actually go, instead of going from the fraction to the percent, we're going to go from the fraction to the decimal and then to the percent. Okay. And that involves just using a calculator. Okay. So basically, all I'm going to do is, you got to remember that this line, this fraction line, represents division. That means divide. So basically, what's happening is it's 3 divided by 5. And if I use a calculator and actually just divide 3 over 5, that will convert it to a decimal. So 3 divided by 5, that's 0.6. So that's easy way to convert it into a decimal, 0.6. And then if I want to go back to a percent, remember that when I went from a percent to a decimal, I moved the decimal to the left. If I want to go back to a percent, I moved the decimal to the right. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to move the decimal 1, 2 places. And then if there's an open spot, then I put a 0. So it's actually 60. So basically, 0.6 is equal to 60%. Okay, so now whenever you see that the numerator and the denominator are the same, 3 out of 3, 4 out of 4, 5 out of 5, that's a whole. And that's equal to 1. So because 3 over 3 is 1. And then if we move that decimal 1, 2 places, you can see that there's 2 open spaces, which means that this is actually 100%. And as we said from the beginning, one or a whole represents 100%. So as long as the same numbers are the same on top, you know that's 100% or equal to 1. Okay, so we'll do the same thing here. 3 divided. Now, you guys might already know that 3 is half of 6. So if it's half, you know that this is going to be 0.5 or 1/2. So, and most of you guys should know that half, it represents 50%. And if I move the decimal, you can see how that ends up becoming a 50. Okay. Okay, so same thing here. I'm just going to divide it. 3 divided by 12. And you can see that's 0.25, or 1/4. And if I move that decimal, that's 25%. So it's a different way of doing it. So here we just made the bottom 100, because percent is always out of 100. And then Here, we just divided the fraction into it and made it into a decimal and then converted it back to a percent. So that's basically what we're going to do for the rest of them, is just use the calculator to kind of convert everything. So 3 divided by 2, that's 1.5. If I move that over, you can see it's 150%. So it's actually over 100% here. So basically, anytime you go over 1, you're going to get over 100%. So if you think about 2, 2 is 200%. Okay, 6 divided by 8, 0.75, 1, 2, and you can see that's 75%. This is really useful for you guys if you're trying to calculate your grade. Let's say you think about the last test. The last test was out of 83 points. And if you got a 62 out of 83, you just divide how many points you got out of the whole, or the total max amount, and that's going to give you the percent. And you can see if I move that decimal over 1, 2 places, that my score is 74%. Or if I round it, it's actually 75, which is a C. All right, you can see these two are already out of 100, so that's easy. So I already know that that's 3%. And if I start with the percent, that I actually go back to the left to make it a decimal. So 1, 2, you can see that as a decimal, this is 0.03. Okay, so if you look like that. Okay, then this one, again, if it's already over 100, that is your percent. So that's 213%. I want to go back to a decimal, 1, 2, point to the left. So that means it's 2.13. Okay, a few more examples here at the bottom. All right, so again, we're going to just do 20. I'm going to do this where I make the bottom 100. Okay, just like this one up here where it was 20. And we know that, if it's 20, I just multiply that times 5. Again, I'm showing you a couple different ways to convert these. Okay, so I make that 100. Then 14 times 5, 70. So if it's 70 out of 100, I know that's 70%. And again, if I want to go back to a decimal, I move it to the left. So that's going to be 0.7 or 0.70. And I really don't have to put that 0 after. So I think it's more important to put the 1 in the front. Okay, this one, there's not really a number I can multiply that times to get it to be 100. So I'm going to go back to the method where I just basically divide the top by the bottom. And you can see I get here 0.291. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to write down the number that's next to it as well. I'll show you why here in a second. Okay, so I'm going to write down 0.291. And usually when we express percent, we do 2 numbers after the decimal. So we're going to get into rounding here. So what I want to do is I only want to keep 2 numbers after the point. So I look at this number, and if that number is 5 or greater, that will change this one. But it's not, it's just a 1. So basically, I'm only going to have 0.29, and I'm going to forget about the other decimals. And by the way, that little symbol right there means approximate or about. So anytime you round something, you put that symbol. Okay, and then if I want to go back to a percent, 1, 2, it's 29%. Okay, so that's helpful, I think, especially if you're trying to calculate what's the percentage of something I have out of the whole. All right, same thing here, 2 divided by 11. Okay, that's going to be equal to 0.1818. Remember, I only want 2 numbers, so I look at the number right next to it, not the 8, but the 1, and I say, okay, is that 5 or more? Nope. So then I'm just only going to keep the 1 and the 8 right after the point, or the decimal. Okay, so it's 0.18. And then to make it a percent, move it over, and I get 18%, or about 18%, because we kind of had to round it. Okay? Okay, same thing here. 43 divided by 51. Okay, you can see that's 0.83843. Okay, I want to keep the 8 and the 4. I look at the 3. Is that 5 or more? Nope. So then I'm just going to keep the 8 and the 4. So it's 0.84 as a decimal. And then I move it over twice, and then I get 84%. Okay, so if that was a test score, that would mean that had a B. At least if you're in my class, or most math classes, 80% is a B. If you're in a different class, that might be an A. Okay, so now we're going to go decimal to percent, then a fraction. Okay, so decimal to percent. So this is just like what we just did a second ago, except we're not starting with a fraction, we're starting with a decimal. We got to move it to the right. You always move 1, 2. So move 2 to the right. Okay, so what I just wrote, move 2 to the right. All right, so I'm going to go 1, 2. That's equal to 25. 1, 2. That's equal to 14. All I'm doing is just the percent right now. 1, 2. That's 97. 1, 2. That's 5%. Okay, so that's the percent. Now let's do, we went from decimal to a percent. Now let's go over to a fraction. Okay, so now remember that percents are out of 100. So if I'm going to convert this back to a fraction, then that means that this fraction is 25 out of 100. Same thing here, 14 out of 100, 97 out of 100, 5 out of 100. All right, and then there's one more step I want to do here. Now, just like when we found slope in the past, we reduced or simplified it. So I want to think, what's a number I can divide into 25 and to 100? Well, 25 goes into 100. Okay, so if I divide this by 25, that's 1. If I divide 100 by 25, that's 4. Okay, so that's my final fraction. What's the biggest number I can think of that will divide into 14 and 100? 2. If I divide this by 2, divide 2, divide by 2, well, 14 divided by 2 is 7. 100 divided by 2 is 50. Sorry, hang on a second. All right, so now 97 out of 100. It's not really anything I can think of. And I'm going to show you how to check that if you get stuck and you don't know what to divide by. Okay, what can I divide here? Well, I can divide 5. 5 divided by 5 is 1. 100 divided by 5 is 20. And I'm going to show you a way to do this without having to just think through your head. Okay, so going back to this one, I'm going to use the calculator function, the fraction function there, that one there. The one says n over d, numerator over denominator. Okay, and I'd put 25 over 100. Hit that button, and it automatically reduces it. Same thing with the 14 over 100. 14 over 100. Boom, divides by 2. Let's try the 97. 97 over 100. You can see there was no way to reduce that, so it just kept it that way. And then the same thing here, 5 over 100. You can see that's 1 over 20, because that's what we got. So I'm going to use that function in the calculator for the rest of these. All right. So again, first thing, 1, 2, move that, 3%. Then put it over 100. Okay, can I reduce it? I don't think so, but let's go ahead and check. Nope, so it's just 3 over 100. Okay, move the decimal, 1, 2. I have an open space. Remember, open space means 0, so it's 50, 50%. I put 50 over 100. Now, as you guys may already know, 50 is half of 100, so I already know this is 1/2. And if you don't know that, put the 50 over the 100. Boom, reduced, 1/2. Okay. All right, move the decimal, 1, 2, 16%. 16 over 100. And I'm not sure. Okay, I could divide by 2, 4, but let's go ahead and use the calculator function. 1600. So it looks like it divided it by 4. Okay, so 4 over 25 is the final fraction there. Again, we always want to reduce. All right, this one's simple. 1, we already know, equals 100, because that's a whole. Okay, so that's a percent. Then as a fraction, well, that's simply just 1, or 1 over 1. It's literally the same, or 3 over 3, or 4 over 4. They're all the same. Okay. All right, that's it.